Welcome back to Baltimore Positive. No one more positive than my next guest, Nestor Aparicio. Nestor, happy draft day. It is finally here.
It reminds me of every draft day, right? I mean, draft day special, I think to anybody that does what we do, been around as long as we've been around, that you remember
Hmm.
every trade up, every trade down. I'll go on the record as the old guy here, the get off my lawn guy, to say this was a far better deal when it was Saturday and Sunday from a sitting still, drinking beer, having parties, doing all that stuff. The league has done it the way they've done it. But when I think of drafts, I think of Saturdays and friends and people gathering. I don't think it's that event now. Now Thursday night they'll get people to come downtown or whatever. I appreciated it better in the old days, but more than anything, the old days brought John Ogden and Ray Lewis, and even after that, Suggs and Ed Reed and other great players. This is a time for you to win a Super Bowl. This is a time for you to get better. This is a time to say, this is how we've improved our team. And I saw the list of their first round draft picks. I've been in Hawaii. It's not any secret, but earlier in the week, I looked down and I saw it and I thought, I'm just going to copy that and put that up.
Mhm.
Because just the names alone, going back to Matt Elam and Brashad Perryman, and just the last 10 years, the years they've had two picks, the year they had Lamar and Hayden, like, how are their drafts? And when I looked at them, I thought, well, it doesn't start with Ogden and Lewis. And when it starts with Ogden and Lewis, you have chances to win Super Bowls. When it doesn't, and when your quarterback wants out, and when you're spending $15 million on an injured wide receiver on a 1-year deal, and everything in this offseason is either to appease the quarterback or get rid of the quarterback at this point. And it's portrayed that way to the fans. Like, by the end of the night, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be here. Lamar is going to be here. Like, DeCosta's got nothing else to do but make some splash. And Lamar's tweeting, it wasn't poop emojis this week. It's SpongeBob SquarePants. So, I mean, we're trying to read tea leaves about this kid. It's overshadowed the draft in a way that they'll pick a player. They'll pick players this weekend. But unless the Lamar thing happens, that would be the cherry on top. And the fans are sort of waiting for that. Everybody's waiting for Lamar to sign a deal that he's never been ready to sign before, all of a sudden.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Elam and
Perryman.
Perryman, and also shortly thereafter, Lewis and Ogden, because I think Lewis and Ogden are prime examples of what happens when you pick the best player available. Whereas Elam and Perryman, they were both picked to fill needs. And I think that's my takeaway as I go back and reflect on the many years of not just the Ravens draft, but all the teams in the NFL. I think when teams reach to get the best player available at the position of need, that's when they make mistakes versus just taking the best player that's there for them.
But it would be no different than Coons Ford, right? Like, if you need a repairman, you don't hire a shot. You hire for need, right? And I think that the needs have been glaring in many instances when Ray Lewis leaves and they need to draft C.J. Mosley, right? Or when they have to fill a player or fill a need. I mean, they're still trying to replace John Ogden, in my opinion, but the one time they got a lottery pick, right? The one time they really sucked, they took a tackle,
They took
right?
a but they took a Hall of Fame tackle, maybe a top 3, top 5 tackle of all time. So they struck gold with it versus taking who was it? Lawrence, the running back from Nebraska.
No. See, I'm
Uh,
talking about Ronnie Stanley. See,
Ronnie
you're confusing
Stanley.
Ogden and
I
Ronnie
am
Stanley,
confused. I
right?
am confused.
I'm just
Absolutely.
saying with Stanley, the only he was their pick when they stunk, when they had a blue
I
chip.
forgot about that. But yeah, because they were looking at Ezekiel Elliott in that draft and Jalen Ramsey and whatnot, and Joey Bosa was there as well. So there
Well,
was
they haven't picked in the top 10. They
they
never pick in the
hadn't,
top
and
10 because they don't stink bad enough, right?
They would have probably picked Laramie Tunsil had it not been for the video that surfaced 30 minutes before the draft. What a story that was at the time.
Well, he was the best tackle in the
He
draft.
was. He was the
Even in
best tackle.
retrospect, he's been paid 4 different times by
He
4 different
has. He
organizations.
performed
Like
very
Jalen
well.
Ramsey has
He,
been paid by all these different organizations. And like Odell Beckham right now, a player they couldn't draft. They couldn't draft that position. So they wind up giving a guy $15 million, maybe past his prime. I don't know. I mean, he was running around the Super Bowl. I was still a media member. That's how recent it was. I was at the Super Bowl 15 months ago, sitting there with my working media pass on, reporting like I had done for 3 decades. He would have been the MVP. I mean, he's a great player. I don't. They're not going to pick a wide receiver tonight, right? To your point,
Maybe.
signing him sort of means you don't really think there's a wide receiver that's going to help you this year in this draft.
Yeah, they all have question marks, particularly at the latter part of the round. And not that higher picks haven't failed in the past either. So it's a crapshoot. So
Well, they were
maybe
going to take Calvin Ridley, right? And then he went and gambled, right? They've had.
I
This is
know.
the time when you talk drafts, Dennis, and people might be listening to this on Sunday morning, afterward, but this is universal. Like, we go into this, and the fans think Lawrence Phillips is coming, and then
Lawrence
John
Phillips.
Ogden shows up,
Yeah,
right?
and
Or
we
the
were all
fans think
disappointed.
we're going to draft the Leland McElroy
Right.
from Texas A&M, and they draft this midget middle linebacker from Miami, that
Right.
Ray
Right.
Lewis.
Right.
You know,
Look, and I'm thinking we're getting O.J. Howard and we get Marlon Humphrey in a more recent draft, so to speak. But there's only 15, 16, maybe 17 blue chip players in every draft class, and after that, you start to get more of the same from the middle part of the first round down to about the third round. Then a talent tails off even more than that. So that's the key for the Ravens at 22. If one of those top 15, 16 guys falls to 22 that they're in love with, they'll turn in the pick. If not, they're hoping to trade back, but of course you always need a partner, a willing partner. And if you can't get one of those, you've got to be ready to turn in your pick.
unlike some other purple flag flyers in the city, you and I, especially on draft day, especially you, because you have taken the draft as seriously as any
Ever since I was
non-media
a kid, man,
person.
ever since I get my Street and Smith's edition, my Athlon, I was back there. I was, I don't know, nine,
Mel
10.
Kiper was sending me his books
Oh
back in
my
the
God.
90s and coming over and sitting down with me for
Shoot,
sure.
I was 9 or 10 years old, and it's back in the mid 70s, and that's how long I've been trying. I'm coming up on 50 years of
I
draft
remember the
coverage.
Oilers drafting Mike Munchak, and like when I was in Oil, I'm wearing my Oiler colors,
Oh
but I
yeah,
remember when the Oilers drafted Steve McNair and thinking he's not going to be able to play. He's Alcorn State. What are they doing?
yeah,
Like,
Alcorn State. You're right.
right? I mean, how's he going to play in the league? Like at that time, there were a lot of questions about all the players, and it was a little
Right.
Saturday afternoon thing that only you, me, and Howard Balzer and
Just
Mel
just
Kiper paid
just a
attention.
handful of us used to get geeked up, and I know the draft going back was 17 rounds, and it went to 12 rounds, and they cut it down to 7 rounds, and now it's a 3-day event. So we have watched the evolution of the draft over space and time, you and I.
I'd say this, going back to when the draft began here in 96, I mean, which is a momentous April 19th, 1996. I based 2 different books on that date and the decisions made that day that allowed them to be what they are. They're still selling tickets off of that, right? They're still selling tickets off of the time when Cal Ripken did 21-31, which was 1995. They're still selling tickets off of Ray Lewis and John Ogden and Brian Billick and Trent Dilfer and everything that was built during that
Mhm.
period of time now, almost a quarter of a century ago. And those drafts, man, 96, they draft Ogden and Lewis, the purple Barney uniforms and the Serifs and Vinny and all that stuff. Every year, 97, I can tell you where we had our draft parties. At NST, 98, Kim Herring, 99, and Chris McAllister, and 2000, and Jamal Lewis, and Travis Taylor. And you just go through. I don't have a book. I remember that this stuff is
Of
like
course, of
remembering my
course.
family members' names, like
Yeah.
literally. But during that period of time, draft day was the biggest day of the year because they had no hope of winning a Super Bowl. We didn't really believe they were going to win a Super Bowl till they actually did, which 5, 6 years into it. And then the draft doesn't become the thing anymore. It's what's the next Hall of Famer you're drafting? Because I mean, you guys draft Hall of Famers around here on the same
Right.
day. And the pressure on Eric and Ozzy, because Ozzy's still in the building and the whole organization. I wanted to ask you over this 10-year period, I put all these names up. How do you think the Ravens have done drafting? Because they haven't drafted any Hall of Famers. We know that.
Well,
They've drafted an MVP quarterback. They've drafted Marlon Humphrey, guys they've paid, Ronnie Stanley. I mean, if you pay the guy a second time, it's a hell of a draft pick, right?
it is, but every team misses. When you look at the Ravens just by themselves, you say, okay, they've been okay, mediocre. But when you look at their body of work in comparison to the other NFL teams, they've done a lot better than most. They're a top team when it comes to selecting the right players. in the draft. They're a top team when it comes to free agents making their team and undrafted free agents and making the difference. So I think that's where they really have shined is getting guys in the middle rounds that have gone and gotten the second contract with another team, guys that couldn't afford to keep on the roster. So I do think they've done a very good job league-wise on the curve over space and time, Ness.
Well, the one thing you would say about how well they've done is when they've get these sandwich picks and these
Yes.
these these middle
Oh,
picks,
when they had
every one of them
sure.
represents a player that's a Ryan Jensen that went and
Oh,
got premier
absolutely.
starter
Oh,
real money
look at
somewhere else.
Ben Powers recently, right? Powers got the huge contract with the Denver Broncos. So
Well, there
yeah,
have been
that
four of those guys in this decade, right?
there
Like
have been
Semele, right? Well, Semele was around the last decade.
Semele, Wagner got a nice
Wagner,
contract. All right,
Jensen,
Jensen,
and
Powers.
Powers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. All offensive linemen. How about that?
Well, all 50 million plus, right?
CJ Mosley, of course he was a first round draft pick, but he got a big contract by the Jets. And speaking of the Jets now with Aaron Rodgers, they moved to the top of the class in terms of AFC powers, right there with the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Bills.
You
They've got
think
a
so?
yes, absolutely, man. Rodgers can still sling the rock. They got a great wide receiver room. They've got great running backs, offensive line, defense is right there. I mean, they check all the boxes. They really
This
do,
would speak volumes to Aaron Rodgers' Hall of Fame
without a doubt,
credentials, right?
without a doubt.
Like, how many players have changed teams in this place? Now, let's start with this. Tom Brady did it and went down to Tampa and won a Super Bowl with them,
Absolutely,
right?
he did.
Almost won two, right? At
Yeah.
43, 4 or 5 years of age. So to say, I don't know that I'm a believer that he makes the Jets a contender in the way that Brett Favre went to Minnesota and had a year and then went to Jets and didn't have a year, right? And players moving around at this point and quarterbacks moving around, there's not a track record for success for this. Hey, they signed a 40-year-old quarterback. They're going to win a championship. Yeah, sure they
No.
are. Denver just signed Peyton Manning. His neck, he looks like his neck's been fused.
But
Hey,
he's
he
got
looks like he can't take a hit. Well, then he
but
starts turtling and he wins a Super Bowl. Should have won two. If they didn't snap the ball over his head up in the Meadowlands, he
yeah.
would have won too, right?
But again, those quarterbacks, Manning and Brady, went to teams that had the pieces there. They weren't devoid of pieces. They both had pieces, right? So, and that's my point. It's not Aaron Rodgers going to New York by himself to salvage a bad team. This was a mediocre to good team without him. Quarterback play will hamstring you, and you can't compete without a good quarterback. And Zach Wilson was not a good quarterback. You add Aaron Rodgers to the mix with those wide receivers, those running backs. I mean, that offense is fire. Their defense is already a top five defense in the NFL. The Jets, the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets has caused a seismic shift in the balance of power in the AFC. I think they're going to win the division. I think they're better than the Bills right now with Aaron Rodgers on that roster. I have the
Wow.
Bills, I have the Jets, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Patriots in that order, based on quarterbacks alone.
I've watched Aaron Rodgers run around the last couple of years, and I watched him with the guy who doesn't wear his shirt on the internet, and like, oh,
Yep.
this is different than Tom Brady or Manning in that I question his heart. I question his leadership. You know, whether he's going to walk in there and everybody's just going to think, oh, you make $55 million a year, you walk on water. He's going to have to go out and earn it. The Green Bay thing, all he did was fight with them, fight with the organization, put in the no different than what the kid's doing here, right? Like, and this kid hadn't done anything Aaron Rodgers has done. And the fight with the franchise and the fan base here with Lamar. I mean, Lamar saying, I don't want to be a Raven. You know, I mean, maybe the Packers people went through this with Favre. They did. Maybe they did go through this because
Absolutely
Favre
did.
and Aaron Rodgers almost similar in the me. Look at me. What do I want? Oh, my feelings, all of that. You didn't hear much about that with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Not that I want to put him in that category because I'm not putting him in that category. You are. You think that they're instantly better than the Bills. I'm Missouri on whether this may, and I
Show me
love
state,
Joe
baby.
Douglas.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I am Missouri because I think Aaron Rodgers, I don't think as highly of him as a human, just before the way he's
Oh,
acted.
no
I
question
don't
about it.
think as
But the
highly of
football
him as I
player,
do
though,
of Manning and Brady.
the football player, the accuracy, the arm strength, the IQ. As a football player, he's an iconic future Hall of Famer, first ballot, no doubt
How
about it.
motivated now, and how motivated? I know the others are motivated around him, but what are the Jets getting? That's what my question. What are the Jets getting here?
We're
In
gonna
the
find
same way
out.
that if Lamar comes back and plays without a contract, what are the Ravens really getting here if they don't have a fully vested Lamar? And I think the Jets have a fully as Aaron Rodgers is if he's out eating mushrooms and doing peyote this offseason and calling into
Uh,
this maniac while he's Broadway Joe in New York, trying to pick up the pieces and go win where they ain't never won. That's
well,
why it's the Jets. That's another reason I'm like, you
the
really
other
think they're a top team in the AFC, but perception is reality, right? Go bet on it.
the
People are
other
betting on it.
the other thing is I do think he yearns for a second Super Bowl. There's a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame and not in the Hall of Fame with one Super Bowl. There's only one quarterback not in the Hall of Fame that has two rings, and that's Jim Plunkett. Time will tell if Eli Manning makes it there, but not saying that Aaron Rodgers will not make the Hall of Fame. He will, but I think a second or third and a third ring would add so much more stature because he lags. He trails Peyton Manning like as everybody else does, but he also trails Joe Montana, Troy Aikman, Terry Bradshaw. He trailed a lot of other quarterbacks. Roger Staubach. I mean, right now in terms of Super Bowls, he's right there with Trent Dilfer and Phil Simms and everybody else.
Well, Dennis, it's amazing. You said the words to me, Jim Plunkett. You said Jim Plunkett to me, and I thought, man, I don't remember the day he was drafted, but he was a 1-1. He was the real
He
deal.
was, and he was all that and then some. But he went to a bad San Francisco team. He got the hell knocked out of him. This is back in the day where you can rough up the quarterback. He played with some very bad teams. He goes to Oakland, wins two Super Bowls, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. Based on
But
what? I
you
think
know
that's
where
one of the
he is
biggest.
though. I was in the Las Vegas airport trapped. Where a two-piece chicken dinner was $18.39 at a fast food restaurant. I'm not mad. I took pictures of this, but I took pictures here, and you could see the Raiders jerseys
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
I went in for JT the Brick because there's a Raiders gift shop down the way.
yeah.
It's right next to the Sammy Hagar. Oh, Cabo Wabo in the Vegas. You have to look for it because it's way
Okay.
in the back, right? The first two jerseys on their wall when you go in are Bo Jackson jerseys. And I'm thinking to myself, Bo Jackson, Charles Woodson, Tim Brown, and there he is, Jim Plunkett. You can see it
Absolutely,
right there, 916, Jim
absolutely.
Plunkett. So I thought, man, you mentioned Plunkett, and I was in the Raiders store. And I'm thinking to myself, these could be the jerseys we have, but we have
Look,
Lewis, Ogden, Reed, Flacco, maybe. No, but in the case of other franchises, this is a day you put a jersey up, and the Raiders clearly haven't drafted well if they're putting Bo Jackson jerseys still up, right?
look, absolutely not. But check this out. I just Googled this. Ken Stabler is in the Hall of Fame. He won one Super Bowl. Jim Plunkett or two, not in the Hall of
Ken
Fame.
Stabler wore Oiler blue. That changes everything for him. He played.
But Jim Plunkett not being in the Hall of Fame is a huge travesty and a huge oversight by the NFL Hall of Fame committee. The
So's
guy
Art
should be in.
Modell.
There's another one. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, name people that have done more for the NFL since its inception than Art Modell.
On next week's program, we'll discuss
Hey,
the Canton football mess and fiasco down there.
it's like Bum Phillips used to say, right? I don't know if he's in the class by himself, but whatever class he's in, it doesn't take long to call roll. That's a Bum Phillips coat right there. Since you're
Well, that
wearing
was
that
about Earl,
brown
right?
blue.
That was
Yeah,
Earl.
it was about Earl,
It
correct.
was
But
all
same
about
thing could be
Earl.
said about Art Modell and all the great ones. And make no mistake about it, as you correctly said, Art Modell belongs in a Hall of Fame. No
Oh,
question about it. That maybe that goof, Grossi, whatever his name is, Grossi in Cleveland, when he whatever meets his maker, maybe he's gone and stops spewing the venom against Art Modell. Maybe he'll get inducted in posthumously in the Hall of Fame.
I know someone that's never going to be a Hall of Fame voter who was in line to be one. And that's okay. That's okay. I've seen those guys on the vote and it's become so politicized. The Baseball Hall of Fame, my God, I used to sit here 30 years ago and talk about it like it mattered. And now you go up there and there's no Pete Rose, there's no Roger Clemens, no anybody they don't like. And yeah, the Football Hall of Fame's kind of the same thing. I hope they pick a Hall of Famer this weekend. I really do.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I
we
think there's
all
a
do.
lot of pressure on
It
DaCosta. I
helps.
think there's a lot of pressure on the organization at this point. The Orioles are putting the foot down to put some pressure on the Ravens to say,
They are. It's
we
great.
play 6 nights a week too, and we want your attention, and we want your money, and we want you to come down. So I'll be chronicling all this. I'm back. I've re-released the Peter Principles because people should know the history of the Orioles. Or why is it so empty? They're winning and no one's going. Well, let me sit up on my lap. Let me tell you a story. So I've been re-releasing some Peter Principles here this week, but I
Great
am back
stuff.
on the grid. Maryland Crab Cake Tour, Captain Larry's, Fadley's. Next week we're in Middle River at McFalls and their new place there. So we're going to be all around town having crab cakes and giving away lottery tickets and hopefully having like what we used to have around here, Dennis, like a draft where we have hope, a baseball team that is relevant in May or June and is going to play games, so we're not sitting here tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. When do the
Yep.
Ravens play? I mean, the Orioles are going to play 115 games between now and the next time the Ravens play, right? So that would be interesting. But the Ravens off season is and the Lamar thing. And if they put a cap on it and Lamar is signed by Sunday and DeAndre Hopkins is here and they draft the next Ed Reed on 22, whatever they're going to do, or trade back, that this is a weekend for them to make progress on the Cincinnati Bengals, whom they're chasing. Make progress on the Buffalo Bills, whom they're chasing. Make progress on the Jets.
On the
You think they're not as
Jets.
good as the Jets? How
Jets,
dare
Jets,
you?
Jets. Yep, beat them last year, barely up there. We would have lost to them had Aaron Rodgers been the quarterback last year, without a doubt. They would have beat us.
Are you picking on Joe Flacco? Are you talking
I
bad
think they
about
beat us
Flacco?
anyway. Flacco, no, not Flacco, but look, the Ravens better figure out the quarterback situation. Put it to you that way.
Well, they beat Joe Flacco last year, right? So you're saying they've upgraded. The Jets have upgraded their quarterback on opening day.
Slightly.
Well, Zach Wilson couldn't play, and that we know that.
I
We know Lamar can play, and now it's what's going to happen.
But
So
the Ravens got to figure out their quarterback situation. That's true. Or it doesn't matter if they draft the next Hall of Famer at 22.
they have a quarterback. He signed for $33 million, and he has to come to work. He has
to show up.
You know what his options are? Same as me. Stay away or go. Those are his options.
Well, that's sad because I realize that if he stays away, if he doesn't show up, he's a free agent next year, an unrestricted free agent, which I was not aware of. That I had forgotten the Le'Veon Bell route that he took. That if you sit out a year, I mean, you can go sign with anybody else. You're still a year older though.
Ray Rice didn't get signed. He had different circumstances, but like
a little bit, slightly different.
Well, I mean, so Lamar sits out and doesn't play. That makes you a real jerk. Now you're going to go out to the owners. What owner is going to step up and give you $250 million when you haven't played?
An owner whose quarterback is the worst in your division, Mac Wilson. A lot of things can happen. That's what I love about today. Anything can happen. There could be a mystery team, could be the Commanders, could be the Patriots that strike a deal for Lamar Jackson. You never know. Teams have to win now. Joe Douglas has to win now. Him and Robert Saleh. If they don't win now, that's why they had to get Aaron Rodgers. One more year of mediocrity, they were both out of a job.
Well, that is the difference between them and here.
Correct.
They haven't won a Super Bowl here. They've won 2 playoff games in 10 years. Harbaugh's got a job for life. DaCosta has a job for life. His wife has a job for life, being the queen of, purple on the internet. Ozzy's still in the building. Nothing's going to change out there if they have a bad draft pick. I mean, I'm being honest, and I'm not saying.
I know that.
Eric DaCosta will be drafting football players a year from now. John Harbaugh will be the head coach of the team. Whether Lamar plays, Tyler Huntley's their quarterback, or whether whoever AJ McCarron's their quarterback.
Right. But they're desperate teams out there, desperate GMs and head coaches. I mean, they're playing, they're drafting, they're playing, they're constructing their team to save their job. And you can't win without a quarterback. You either have one or you don't. What's the old adage? If you have two, you have none. Some teams have no quarterback right now. Anything can happen on draft day. There's the 49ers have sniffed around, kicked the tires with Lamar Jackson. You never know what team says, you know what? Let's get this guy.
I know one thing. 5 years ago, no one wanted him on draft day. No one wanted him, right? No one was going to turn the keys over. Now, with the money and giving up a couple of picks, right? No one has stepped up yet. Now, tonight, when the clock's on and you have picks and you have the ability and you've talked to Eric ahead of time, and look, Eric's the smartest guy in the room, right? I mean, Eric was ready to deal Hollywood Brown this time last year. Lamar Jackson knew it and then pretended he didn't know it. on draft night, right? Like literally,
Right. He knew.
they have played out everything that can happen this weekend
They
in their
have.
mind,
They
other
have.
than the Vikings not turning the card in.
Look, the Vikings need a quarterback. They may be ready to move away from Kirk Cousins. Anything can happen today, which is why we're going to be tuned in. And I'm sure the WNST text service sponsored by Coons Ford of Baltimore it's going to be live. It's going to be lit tonight, and I'll be looking forward to your tweets. By the way,
Well, Luke will have his fingers on the keys, and I'll have my fingers on the keys. I'm going to be like Fred Flintstone with the toothpicks, hold my eyes open. But if
okay,
I were really on Hawaii time, it'd be like a lunchtime draft.
would
Everything in Hawaii
I
happens
know
at 10
it's
in the
great.
morning on
And a
Tuesdays.
lot to like about Hawaii.
Oh, yeah, man. I'm driving along. I'm watching the Orioles game on the phone. I'm like,
Good
okay.
stuff.
I mean, the
Good
Orioles,
stuff.
Orioles might get no hit today. Oh, they
That's right.
won.
That's right. That's
The
right.
other Rodriguez. So I've been into it with Luke all week. We did some baseball earlier,
Good.
so we'll be after it. Tech service will be live, brought to you by Coons Ford. I'm doing crab cake tours this weekend, and I know one thing: they don't have to play football on Monday morning. The Orioles have to play baseball.
That's right.
But the perception is we'll have a report card for them. There'll be an A,
That's
a
right.
B, a C, a D. There'll be
Yeah.
something by
The
Monday.
steals, I can't wait for the lingo, the post draft lingo.
I can't wait for the third or fourth round draft pick that they say, oh, he's
Right.
a first rounder.
Right.
He's
Right.
going
Right.
to be
Right. Right.
Mark
Right.
Andrews. He's going to be
Always. It's
Orlando Brown. All
it's
right.
coming.
Well,
It's coming. That's why we love the draft.
I will. I have cold beverages. I
All
have
right.
great food. I am ready for the draft, and the WNST Twitter and all of our social media is alive and well all weekend long.
All right. Appreciate it, Nestor. Welcome back. So there he goes, Nestor J. Aparicio here at 1570 AM. WNST will take a quick break and come back right after this.